It's time for Measure Twice.
Welcome to Measure Twice. I'm Rob Perugini, along with Chris Kramer from C. Kramer Interiors and Joel Graber from Graber Custom Remodeling. This is the show that helps you envision your home's potential, and you're listening to us on Michiana's News Talk 95.3 MNC. We're brought to you in part by Leatherman Supply. Everything windows, doors, cabinets, and countertops, with the showroom now open in Granger next to C. Kramer Interiors and Hoosier Hardwood Floors, Michiana's trusted and valued experts on hardwood floors. You can visit them at HoosierHardwoodFloors.com. I can't pretend that we're not alone. We're not alone. And I'm not talking about outer space stuff here.
Yeah, I feel a presence.
There's a presence in the studio. Is it pre-coffee or mid-coffee? We have with us, ladies and gentlemen, Todd Zeiger from Indiana Landmarks. Welcome aboard.
Hello. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for coming in. It's really it's awesome to have you here because, as everybody listening will find out, you might have the most interesting job in building in the area. I don't know. To me and Joel, I think. Chris, you're
I think it's super interesting
and super important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, Todd, why don't you tell us a little bit about Indiana Landmarks and then what you do about Indiana Landmarks?
Well, thanks. Yeah. So Indiana Landmarks, we're a not-for-profit organization that exists to save places that matter, which is a really fancy word to say. We try to save historic places that folks find important in their communities, sites, buildings, houses, all around the state of Indiana, and I've been blessed to be the director of the Northern Office since 1998. So
wow.
I'm very, very, very pleased, and I'm so fortunate to have worked for the organization this long, and could actually vindicate when I told my folks what I wanted to do for a living. I wanted to save old houses, and they kind of gave me that quizzical look. And they're like, well, okay, and God bless them, they supported it, and I've really been fortunate to do my following for these past many years.
So, how long has Indiana Landmarks been around? Do you know?
Indiana Landmarks started in 1960.
Wow.
So, yeah, when someone says, "Oh, we can't save that building," it's blah blah blah. I'm like, yeah, well, we probably can show you one that was worse than it was saved. It started with a group of individuals in Indianapolis that wanted to save some historic houses from the interstate that goes through the middle of downtown.
Right.
And we've grown from there to an organization of over 6,300 members, 9 offices around the state and a headquarters. We have a little over 45 staff situated around the state because you got to go where the historic buildings are. They aren't all in just one place. So our regional offices, like I do, we can get out to the communities.
I think that sometimes you think about Midwest and you, at least from a national perspective, right? You think about the Midwest, and to a lot of people, the Midwest starts in the 20s, or in the like the Dust Bowl, like what Hollywood has started talking about, and that's not true. There's cities in Indiana that are really old, like almost match the American Revolution.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we have communities that have buildings from the 18th century, 19th century, or very early. Down, and they're mostly obviously along the Ohio River and Wabash River, where the first settlements were at, and South Bend even was early started 1820s. So a lot of our buildings from that period are gone, but certainly have deep history here, and there's a lot to save. So that's what we get to do.
It's kind of interesting, and I don't want to talk about Indy too much. We're not necessarily broadcasting there, but it is kind of a nice city to drive around and like pick out. Like there are some older places that are kind of big, have a lot of character.
Yeah, and I always tell people when they're in a historic town and they notice the architecture, generally, if it's been preserved, it's not by accident. Somebody stepped up to say it mattered and they wanted to save it, and there are ways to do that. Legally or not, avocationally. And so, there's a reason that those exist. We like to go to other towns and visit them, and those historic places exist because somebody protected them or did restoration on them, loved them. And so we're proud. Indiana Landmarks is the largest of our type of organization in the United States by staff, funding, and what we've in our age. So, yeah, been around a long time.
I think it speaks to the richness of the Midwest sensibility that it's not a matter of not letting go. It's a matter of understanding the importance of keeping something that has history.
Yeah, actually drove some of my early interest in it was watching downtown South Bend disappear as it was demolished, urban renewal later on, and just wondering why were we just throwing this stuff away? It just didn't make sense to me, like why we just why we were just throwing our buildings away. And I wanted to figure out, I can talk about that much more, fancy now, but why were we just throwing our buildings away? And that drove my interest in preservation and still does today, where we're like, call it sustainability and, all kinds of terms, but that's the core of it.
Well,
reuse.
If it means keeping it, call it sustainability.
Yeah, right.
Do that.
Brand it however you want.
Right. Put whatever makes it shiny enough to keep, then that's what you should do, right? What was your first building?
My first restoration?
Yeah.
I actually worked on a barn when I was in college out in Rhode Island, so I guess that would be one of my early ones. And then I actually worked in construction for a couple of years when I first got out of school. My first private project was moving a house in South Bend that was the parsonage for our church that was going to be demolished, which my wife and I moved and lived in for several years. So,
wow.
Never start small.
You have a penchant for moving homes, too.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about that on the way in, that my thesis for college was actually on building moving, and for some reason it's always been a passion. So,
what's your education then?
I have a degree in historic preservation.
Oh, nice.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't think, that's, for some reason, I always associate you with construction.
Yeah, well, obviously that's a key piece of it, but
yeah.
my degree is pretty broad, so a lot of different types of aspects, legal and.
So what school does that?
There are several. Mine was actually from a school out east called Roger Williams University. I knew what I wanted to do very young, so found it and went out east and spent a couple of years learning about architecture, history, historic preservation after getting my minor at IU South Bend. So, yeah, business.
We're talking with Todd Zeiger from Indiana Landmarks, and we're finding out that he likes old homes. And do you have an unhealthy like for this old house?
I don't. I don't like this old house. But
you don't
I'll be careful
like it?
Since this is being broadcast.
Well, you can not like it. You're allowed to not like it.
I tease it's actually more this new house. When you watch what they do to them,
that is true.
It ends up being more new than old by the time they're done. And it gravitated towards that over the years. When it started, it was much more what I would call traditional preservation, reuse, what I was saying about that. And as the sponsors got involved in other things, it shifted. There's a lot of new replacement.
What's funny is growing up, that was my favorite show.
Absolutely.
Like I would watch it every Saturday growing up. And in the last maybe 15 years, I just don't watch it anymore because it's just not the same.
You talk to a lot of people that are in the field. That's very much the case. And I mean, things shift over time, and that's fine. But it was an early one for me too. I'd watch that on the show and learned a lot. But it's just not the same anymore.
I mean, I think that's when it was on PBS. It was its most natural. They had an adorable accent and an interesting project. You can't look away.
Yeah,
I never watched it. Never saw an episode.
Really?
No.
Not even by accident?
Nope. Not even a snip.
There you go. See, Chris has always been ahead of his time.
He knew going
He knew.
He
had a disturbance in the force, and then couldn't go on. But yet, and this old house served its purpose because it's in the lexicon, right? That's what it is. But your first building was actually a barn in Rhode Island, which is fascinating because you want to talk about lots of decay, lots of things decay there because it's so close to the saltwater, right? I mean, it's
and they have lots of issues out there, and it was actually at a museum, so it was just part of one of those. You have an opportunity when you're in school, and we did.
Yeah, you just.
So it was
fast forward here. Have you done barns here?
Yeah, I have actually owned an old historic bank barn out south of town. In my free time, work on that too. So yeah, it's all good. I love timber frame. It's awesome, and got my own problem child.
I was owning a barn like owning a boat. You just spending your time and money on it.
It's fantastic. It get me started on stories, but it actually was built out of an older barn on the site that they took apart and reconstructed bigger to its current form as a bank barn. Which get to your earlier notion of Midwest sensibilities. Why just throw it away?
Right.
Take it apart. And you see this on old homesteads all the time. They take things apart and put them back together. So, yeah, it's a big four bay bank barn that dates to 1880.
We had, because couple years ago when we bought the property that we have that we're moving our shop and offices to, we had Todd come out and look at it, and he's like, I'm pretty sure that this was taken apart and put back in this place. Mm-hmm. So it's older than where it was constructed at currently. Mm-hmm. But it makes sense when you look at it. You see, okay, there's some pockets here and some joinery that it makes sense that this probably was a barn somewhere else, moved.
Well, they looked at it like to function first.
Yeah.
Like they weren't saying, we got to keep the integrity of the barn. They were like, we still need a barn. They were.
Well, they couldn't just run down to Barnes R Us and pick up some timber. They had to cut the tree down. They had to turn it into a beam. And you just think about the number of hours and time it took to do that. They would just not start over.
Right.
And so when you look at those beams and you see the extra pockets and holes and like, they just turned the beam around and they just rebuilt it. It was like, why not? Right. It's still strong. And so it's a piece of the puzzle. And so I really love reading buildings once you know what you're looking for. Mm-hmm. Houses, commercial buildings, barns, you can read them like a book.
Well, when we come back, let's dive into that. And you have a lot of interesting to say. We're here with Todd Zeiger from Indiana Landmarks. This is Measure Twice. Welcome back to Measure Twice. I'm Rob Perugini, along with Joel Graber from Graber Custom Remodeling and Chris Kramer from C. Kramer Interiors. This is the show that helps you envision your home's potential. You're listening to us on Michiana's News Talk 95.3 MNC. We're brought to you in part by Leatherman Supply. Everything windows, doors, cabinets, and countertops, with the showroom now open in Granger next to C. Kramer Interiors and Hoosier Hardwood Floors, Michiana's trusted and valued experts on hardwood floors. Make sure you give Hoosier Hardwood Floors a look. And you can visit them at HoosierHardwoodFloors.com. We're here with Todd Zeiger from Indiana Landmarks, special guest. We've just increased our character factor by at least threefold. At least, if we're doing numbers. Yeah. We're looking at it that way. So, Todd, you've come a long way, from education to now. But let's talk about the something that I was, trying to come to grips with in my mind was we talk a lot about luxury items on this show, like a lot of high end. You're doing, some crazy stuff. Chris is putting an elephant room in a basement. I don't know. I'm saying elephant room, but like giant humidors, all these like high luxury items. And I think there's a correlation to that because there's a lot that goes into owning an historic home.
You could have Chris talk to that.
Yeah, Chris could talk about that. And it's kind of it takes resources, either money or elbow grease or both,
Yeah.
And it kind of fits that it takes a certain kind of person to want to own that house.
I think historic houses or vintage properties offer owners an opportunity that they can do it themselves that new houses don't. Oftentimes. And so while it can be expensive depending on what you're doing, but there's also options to learn how to do it yourself. Mm-hmm. And vintage properties, old houses, we'll think about houses today, offer that opportunity for a lot of DIY and are forgiving in regards to like you can make mistakes and then fix them. So they're not so scary in that regards because you can work on it and learn. And I know a lot of people that they had no idea what they were doing. And over the years have learned, and now they're helping us teach window restoration workshops, in a matter of a few years. So I think, they can be expensive depending on the kind of house you're working on, but also they can be affordable to someone living there if they choose to use their elbow grease, I think is what you called it, sweat equity.
And it's high reward.
Absolutely. I mean, and you walk in and you can show your folks, hey, look what I did, or your friends come over and they look at the woodwork you just stripped or whatever. I pick your topic.
Right.
Chris is like,
oh man,
no more woodwork. But so I think sometimes people have the perception as if it's really expensive, and it can be depending on the project. But there's also the flip side where it can be an affordable housing option for someone, and you don't always have to do specific nail by nail restoration. It could just be a really nice old house to live in, and you can learn how to fix.
Yeah. Right, like living in your hobby.
In a way, yep.
In a way,
mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with that. It's kind of cool,
Yep.
There's a cool factor. Not to get too deep, but these houses have witnessed stuff, things
Well,
that have happened.
that's why I like it, and I think it's something that's worth touching on. Is like these are like the history and the character of your community, and it's why it's worth saving them. I mean, that's something that I've always done with my kids is taking them to like different, like Studebaker Museum or different things to understand and appreciate the community that they come from. And when you have that baseline of appreciation, you value your community more, and you're going to put more into it. And so that's why I love Indiana Landmarks and some of the other organizations in the area that actually put that time and effort into preserving our past for the future.
Right. It's available. Were you going to say something, Chris?
Well, I think just speaking from personal experience, it's not so much just you own a historic home, but my personal experience is now I understand. I've learned a lot about South Bend's history by owning this property, because it's made me want to go back and find out when this was purchased, what South Bend was at 1830, and it's really fascinating to see how South Bend developed, kind of almost west to east, and so that part of it's interesting as well. So then it's like, oh wow, this is worth something,
absolutely,
more than just preservation. It needs to be saved because it's part of South Bend history.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of folks, they immediately gravitate to our work around architecture, but really what it is the stories that those buildings can tell you, and what you just talked about, Chris. You're immediately connected with the long story of wherever you happen to live, and that's important. That's what connects people to their community and keeps them here, keeps them coming back. And so preservation is really about telling the stories. It's preserving the people that were there and those little fingerprints that touched those houses over the years, because they're still there if you look, and that immediately connects you to someplace, and that's really what drives preservation. Architecture is certainly key and vastly important, but what really is, it's those stories. That's what really attracts people to the place and keeps them there. Absolutely.
We're talking with Todd from Indiana Landmarks, and what's interesting is, Joel, you're working on the Havilah Beardsley house in Elkhart, and what did you find on Tuesday?
Yeah, we were pulling apart the post because we have to do some restoration on those, and on the base of one of them, it had some handwritten stuff about in this post is like some historical documents from like 1997. I don't know if they assumed it would be longer.
Oh,
yeah.
But it was a little time capsule stuck inside the post. So it had some pictures of them doing the work, what it looked like at that point in time, and it was just cool, because it's somebody who cared about that property at the time and wanted to show what they had done.
Well, it is like that's a testament to the kind of person that kind of lives in one of those houses. It's like, oh, this thing, I'm here, and it's going to be here after me. I'm not going to be here. And this thing will still be.
Have you done that yet, Chris? You going to put a time capsule in your house?
No.
He's just going to he's going to be buried on the property.
Yeah.
That's going to be the time capsule.
Spread my ashes in the crawl space. I don't know.
It's going to be.
You might not want to write that note right now because it might contain things that. Wait till you're done and all happy, and then write the note, put it in the time capsule. But certain times you don't want to write the note to the future about what you're doing.
That's pretty funny. Have you ever done that? Have you ever restored something and found something like that?
That's legendary in preservation, finding stuff in walls. I mean, sometimes it's fun stuff, sometimes it's not. But people leave traces intentionally or unintentionally, and those are those little touch points, and they're fun. You open up a wall and you do find something, like, oh, well, there's that watch from I lost 20 years ago, so fun connection. The Havilah Beardsley house, the museum property now, was actually, that house was all aluminum sided. Yeah. And a very early project when I came on board with Landmarks was the great unveiling of that house. We stripped all that aluminum off of that house to reveal it was underneath aluminum sided brick house. I always give kudos to those vinyl and aluminum siding salesmen. Like to talk a brick house owner into vinyl siding. Like, good for you.
That's good. You did it. Wow. Yeah, that's
You're a real
I want to
salesman.
know that pitch.
that's
Can use it when I'm trying to talk people out of replacing their windows. But
well, you find things. You know, the house speaks in a lot of different ways. It speaks by what it keeps too. You know,
absolutely, thunder there, so that's good.
These guys and our listeners have heard. My brother had a false wall that he lived with for like 10 years before he realized that it was an entire. You could walk behind his wall.
Yeah, you always want to get into the head of the people that did that because you just scratch your head and like, what were you thinking? Like, you want to know why they did it. They obviously had a reason, but you're always wondering like, what was going through their mind when they did that?
Yeah, well, I mean, and it was substantial. It's like 4 feet. You know, like it was big enough that you could hide in there. You know, but his other house was a Sears kit.
Oh man, that's cool.
Those are cool houses.
And they had the original boxes in the attic from the teens. I mean, it was a long time.
They even had the box.
They
That's
had
really
the-
cool.
That's
Like I got super fascinated with those like 5 years ago, and I have a bunch of books and stuff that because those are cool.
He told the owner, the people that bought it from him, he just kept it with the house. Like, so the instructions were up there.
Wow, that is really cool.
You know, everything. But what was really funny is he had to put an electric, move his electric box over and run a wire, and he had to open up the plaster, and he found like 25 beer bottles. Like, he's like, they drank 25 beers building this house, you know, or like from the teens, like old. This is that's how they knew it was pre-prohibition.
You have to multiply that out.
So I don't know, 1905 maybe?
25 is like a 10x.
It was a long time. It was a long time ago. But when we come back, let's dive a little bit more into the design aspect of old homes. This is Measure Twice. Welcome back to Measure Twice. I'm Rob Perugini, along with Chris Kramer from C. Kramer Interiors and Joel Graber from Graber Custom Remodeling. This is the show that helps you envision your home's potential. You're listening to us on Michiana's News Talk 95.3 MNC. And we're brought to you in part by Leatherman Supply. Everything windows, doors, cabinets, countertops, with the showroom now open in Granger right next to C. Kramer Interiors. And Hoosier Hardwood Floors. Michiana's trusted and valued experts on hardwood floors. You can visit them at HoosierHardwoodFloors.com. We're visited by today's special guest, Todd Zeiger from Indiana Landmarks, and we are talking everything restoration today and why it's important. And I follow a guy on YouTube. It's called Blue Ox Millwork. You familiar with that guy? Are you?
I've seen it, yeah.
Yeah, he's a pretty crazy old guy. And he was saying that wood remembers. He was talking about how wood remembers. And he goes in and he can look at grains, you know, and he talks about like why a certain grain in a wood is thick, thin, and it's really super interesting. Whether he is pulling our leg or not, I don't know. It doesn't matter because he can spin a yarn. That's really cool. But wood does remember, and when you go into these homes and you look at some of the trim, that's remarkable. Like, remarkable. You know, you just, how is this still here? And we're, you know, like, this is just beautiful at like cathedral grains that you don't see and things like that anymore. When you're going to a new home and you're looking, you know, not a new home, obviously, but when you go into like look at a new project, what do you look at first? I get the architecture aside. When you walk in, what are you looking at? What bones do you look for?
I mentioned reading buildings before, and Chris talked about, you know, visiting different places. And when you pay attention to the architecture, and I'll get to the reading of the house interior, you can read a neighborhood like a book. Oh, there's the farmhouse, and then this house was built. And, oh, look, these people remodeled. And when they remodeled, their neighbors wanted to remodel. You know, in the 1880s, you can read a neighborhood just like a book. And that, to me, is a fun thing to do. Like, you can walk down the street. And I do the same thing when I walk into a property for the first time. I'm looking for those touches from the previous people that owned it. I call them fingerprints, whatever term you want to use. And I'm looking for those changes because you can read that interior and figure out where the door used to be. You said wood remembers. Molding tells the story. You can find where the door used to be because you can look at the molding and see the cuts. You can tell where the wall may have been before. So I'm looking, when I'm reading a house, when I walk into it for the first time, I'm going to figure out what's the original. That's always interesting. But for me, I'm also interested in what are the really cool changes that we might want to keep. And also like, oh, no, that needs to go away kind of changes. And so wood remembers and molding remembers, floors remember, and you can read those changes very quickly once you've done it for a long time. I'm sure Chris does this when he walks in. He can figure it out before he gets started on his designs. And to me, that's the fascinating part about history. It's what differentiates the historic house from just walking into a new home in a suburb, because those new homes don't have those changes yet.
No, you're the original.
Yeah,
at that
and
point.
Probably won't last long enough to have those changes, but that's a whole other conversation. Sorry, I'll take that away from you.
Thinking the same thing.
So that's what I'm looking for. I'm always looking for the story of the house, because that's what sells it in the future to somebody to buy it. So, Chris, you'd probably do some of the same stuff.
Well, I mean, to be honest, I haven't worked on too many historic homes in my career, but other than mine.
I was going to say, you got one.
But to your point, I can reference back to my house. I walked through it thinking, wonder what this was like when they built it in 1832, because it was just the brick at that point. Mm-hmm. But I can see where there were windows, and then when they put the addition on in 1860, they filled that in, so I can still see the outline. And I had the family that owned it for 58 years. They bought it in 1960. I had her in, and she was telling me, oh, this was here, and we did this here, and the reason we did this was to make this a laundry room, which was the summer kitchen, and we needed a doorway, so we added this, and it really made me appreciate just their 58 years in one spot, which tells me that there was a great love affair with that property.
Right.
And they essentially saved it and brought it to what it is today. So now I'm just carrying on from where they stopped. Now it's my turn.
A lot of that sounds like it flows from necessity. We needed a. We needed a. This had to have a. Or
yeah, you need a bathroom. You need a kitchen.
Right.
Which they didn't have before.
Right.
And just see how they ran the wiring and how they were creative in running ductwork to put in heating and air conditioning, and the clever ways they did it. You would not, if you didn't know, you wouldn't know.
Right. Right. A friend of mine has a house on Portage. It's an old, really old home. And she says something interesting. She's like, when I come down the stairs every morning, I go into the kitchen, the house says hello to me when I step into the kitchen because it goes, Rip. And when she had her floors restored, I think by Hoosier Hardwood, actually, she's like, oh, he's like, yeah, we're just looking for those creaks. She's like, don't get rid of the creak there. Unless it's like, I want that. I want this house. It says good morning to me every morning. You know?
We were talking about preservation, restoration. Restoration as a thing is really a modern invention, dating to probably the early 1960s. Is a advocacy, because before the modern replacement systems, it was just what you did. You just fixed your windows. You didn't just rip them out. You just fixed your wall. It was just part of what was normal activity on a property. And really in the 60s, historic preservation became a thing because people were reacting to the loss of those properties, and where this whole lexicon of restoring it back. And so it's just always fascinating to me. Houses are very resilient, like what you were just talking about, where you can read what was there, and you don't necessarily always put it back, but it's part of the story. And but it's fascinating about these old houses. Yeah,
you're not. I think when you're in it, you don't have this grand. You're not associating with this grand, bigger picture. You're just living in your house.
Right.
It's certainly if it was 1860 and you needed something, you weren't saying, well, 1999, this is really gonna be something.
Yeah.
You don't do it that way.
Well, it's just the idea that, like, you look at the trim and you realize that, they took the tree off the property and they milled it there on site and put that trim in. They didn't go to Lowe's and Menards and or the box stores to buy their
Right.
trim. It was all handmade right from trees from their property.
Then was that true in South Bend too? Like, do you see that?
To a certain period. I mean, we got sawmills pretty early because we're an industrial city here and have the railroad. So by the Victorian period, certainly they were shipping trim in, the standard stuff we see, but it's still better quality than we get today because it was out of old growth lumber, and that's a whole other conversation. But certainly Chris's house, that age, that was off the property up to a certain point. But we had sawmills pretty early here, but early on, like you're talking about, certainly was off the framing and all that certainly came off the property, which is why you look at the frame and you find walnut and poplar and oak, and you're like, whoa, because that's what they had.
And they all move at a different rate, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I was just thinking about your wood has memory. All that, what you call a graining on that is really just the memory of the tree's rings as it grew. And
absolutely,
that's the memory
right.
of that tree's life. And there's a whole study of that. But when you look at that grain, it's the history of that tree.
You can find furniture this guy will do made out of trees that were part of a fire.
Oh, yeah.
And it's got fire rings in it.
Sure.
And I didn't even know that was a thing.
The forest would burn and it would leave us fire.
Yeah, fire ring, which, some people are like, well, that's sad. The tree made it through a fire. But no, that's the purpose of the tree. The tree was going to die. Trees in this country don't live as long as you think. they expire. Yeah. Not a sequoia that's 10,000 years old. That's not what I'm talking about. But like the trees are doing. But the fire rings and being able to walk in and look at that and identify, oh, wow, look at, this was fallen timber that was used. This was one that was cut down just by looking at like what's going on there. And I think that's we only have about a minute left in this segment, but I look at doors a lot, and I have an unhealthy obsession with doors. I might, but I always look at doors like, how are they solid wood? Are they the original doors? Things like that is what I see. But I'm not restoring the place. I'm just looking at the big, I look at the shiny objects in there, the details of it. But when we come back, I'm really interested to see how many projects you got going on, how you can be supported, how somebody can be supportive of your nonprofit. And when we come back, let's get into how to keep that going and make sure that it stays as successful as it is. This is Measure Twice. Welcome back to Measure Twice. I'm Rob Perugini, along with Joel Graber from Graber Custom Remodeling and Chris Kramer from C. Kramer Interiors. This is the show that helps you envision your home's potential. And thanks for listening to us on Machinist News Talk 95.3 MNC. We're brought to you in part by Leatherman Supply. Everything windows, doors, cabinets, and countertops with the showroom now open in Granger, right next to C. Kramer Interiors. And Hoosier Hardwood Floors, Michiana's trusted and valued experts on hardwood floors. You can visit them at HoosierHardwoodFloors.com. We're here with Todd from Indiana Landmarks, and we're very fortunate to have him in here, keeping northern Indiana's historic homes and sites intact. What a great mission that you guys have. It's really special. And we could go on. We can get in the weeds and talk about how important it is. It's obviously important. I want to talk about, how do you keep going as an organization?
Oh, we keep going as an organization thanks to support from our members and donors and really good management by our board. As a not-for-profit, we're no different than any other, and we rely on that sort of financial support from members who value our mission. There are folks that value what we do but may not be able to do it themselves, so they'll give. There's folks that do this as a living that are members and donate. It really runs that gamut. But we keep going because of our over 6,000 members and our donors who allow that to take place, because it takes money to run an organization that's statewide and has the capacity that we do. We're also very fortunate because we started in 1960 and had funds from Indianapolis's early industrial folks like Eli Lilly and others. And then just through 60 plus years now of really good financial management by our board, we're in a very good financial position. So that's amazing, and it allows us to do our job. And I get to run around northern Indiana and work with people to save old buildings. So what better is there, right? But it all goes back to our members and our donors and our appreciation for their support and allowing us to do all the crazy things that we do.
How does it work? Do you purchase homes, or do you help people who already own a home, or how does the organization function?
Yeah, Joel. Pretty much. Okay, next question. Yes, it does. It really runs. The hardest question that I get is, what do you do? I'm like, okay, well, let's get some coffee. It really runs the gamut. We exist to save places that matter, and that can be from showing up and doing a site consult, a technical assistance. Like Joel mentioned, we went and looked at the barn. We don't charge for that. We ask you to be a member. It's fine. So simple technical assistance, because folks have preconceived notions from TV shows about what should or shouldn't be done.
Time out. I want to make a point here. You can't see him because he was on the radio, but was that a scowl? That was like a TV shows.
TV shows, they have preconceived notions and talking people off the ledge because they think they have to do this or that. So technical assistance is key. We do that all the time. We assist. Our main goal is trying to grow small, local, not-for-profit preservation organizations to do their work in their own town, so building their capacity to do that. That could run the gamut from giving them a small grant to do a study on a building to loaning money to buy a building and rehab it themselves. That's really where our core mission is trying to grow little Indiana landmarks locally, because we can't save them all, and we have to have folks local to do that. And when there are buildings that nobody can or won't do locally that are of enough merit, we do them ourselves. So, we can't restore every old building in historic building in Indiana, but there are times when a building is of significance for whatever reason that's determined, and we'll step up and do it when no one else will. And we do that as well. So it really runs that gamut, and that's what my job is so fun and fascinating, because every day it is different, and that can be good, and most days it is. But we really have a lot of tools, to use that tired cliche, in our toolbox to help save places that matter.
How would you suggest somebody, if they're listening right now and they're just like, you know what, I am interested in helping the organization, what's the first step for somebody who doesn't own an old home? Yeah. Maybe they're a burgeoning future one, but
yeah, obviously I would encourage folks to be a member. It's really affordable. It's how we stay in business. IndianaLandmarks.org is our website. There's a tab to join, and you can become a member for a very affordable price, like $50. And you can get our magazine through that. We have a free e-letter. So if you just want to kind of tune in, find out what's going on in preservation around the state, that's the fastest, easiest, cheapest way to do it, and it supports our work. And then from there, you read those articles.
I love the magazine.
Yeah, we have a fantastic staff in our marketing department who do an amazing job at our magazine and our e-letters. We feed content to them, and they make us look good. So it's all great. I would just really encourage folks to join at whatever level you'd like and get that magazine, our e-letter. It really ties you in. It also gives you insight into workshops we do. We do a whole host of hands-on DIY training types of workshops, so you can find out that. Tours. That's really where folks kind of get started with us. And then from there, you can tune in. You can, get involved in other ways, volunteering. Encourage you to buy a historic property and restore it, and then we can come help you talk about that. That's the best way.
I'm not surprised that Indiana Landmarks is the largest in the country for one specific reason. And if anybody's ever asked for directions in Indiana, you know that you get your directions based on stuff that used to be there.
Yeah, that's true. Unfortunately, our job is to make sure that that we don't have as many used to be's as there used to be.
And I may or may not have been given directions by Todd to go someplace based on something that used to be there, and I had to call Joel and be like, I do not see a funeral home. There's not a funeral home. Where is this? Oh, well, it used to be there. And I'm like, oh, my fault. I forgot.
No doubt. Well, it was there until about, 6 months ago. I'm sorry. It wasn't even a historic funeral home. I know exactly what you're talking about. That's the sad part.
And I was in the parking lot of the said funeral home like, I don't see one. I don't see it here.
And now it's a laundromat. So, Things change.
But things change,
funny.
but they shouldn't change so much that things go away. And I think that's the goal, isn't it?
Well, and the term landmark, if you want to get in that, we do that. We navigate by landmarks. And that was never driven home to me more than when I led a mission trip to a tornado area, and there were no landmarks. And it was so disconcerting. There were no historic buildings. There were no trees. There were no nothing. And it really drove home to me how much we do navigate by landmarks, be them historic or other, right?
Right.
That when you lose that landmark, be it a really amazing historic house on a corner or a former laundromat, like people navigate by landmarks, and our job is to save the historic ones, obviously. But yeah, that is driven home when they don't exist anymore.
Right.
Oh,
and we appreciate as a community what you guys mean to the community. It is not it's not easy work. It's technical in a lot of places. Even though you're like, you can fix it, but to a lot of people that seems daunting, and I think that you bridge that gap from possible. You know, you make things seem they seem impossible. Well, you make them possible. So we appreciate that.
We try, and we're always pushing back on the culture because all people see on TV is the replacement side,
Right.
And so we're constantly pushing back, and we win more than we lose. But yeah, thank you for those comments.
Winning more than you lose is great, and Cubs fans just aren't used to that.
Yeah,
so there's a lot of people who have to explain that
true.
to out there. But it's kind of cool when you're driving down any road in America that you don't see a skyscraper in the right next to you. You can look around and see them. It's really fun to pick those things out, and you get better at it as you do it. Right?
Yeah.
You get better at finding them as you do it. Is there anything that you see, any trends on the horizon that you see with your business? Are you seeing more people taking up the mantle?
I think it's divergent. I think you see more people tuning in to doing rehab, but you also see a lot more push for just replacement. So I think it just depends on the personality of the person and what they've been exposed to over time. I'd be curious to know if Chris or Joel have what they're seeing. So there is a strong component of DIYers out there, but there's also a really strong cultural push for just rip it out and replace it, which they aren't going to last. And get me started a whole nother show, but it just isn't going to last, and it's pushing back on that. I was going through a building this week. Windows were 15 years old; they were already shot. You see it all the time, and people think, "Oh yeah, you're saying that because you're a restoration crazy person." I'm like, no, I can show you photos of because I've been in the business long enough of when they replaced those windows, and now they're so it's like.
Well, thank you so much for being in here, Todd Zeiger from Indiana Landmarks. We really appreciate what you do. You're a welcome guest here whenever you want to. Thanks for listening. This is Measure Twice.
Podcasts by Federated Media.